Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Data Specialist Office Hour. We're here with Susan Vincent and a lot of people from the community. We're glad to see everyone joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan Vincent so that she can get started talking to us about data request tracking.
Yeah, thank you. So today I really appreciate you all being here because this is to some extent kind of crowdsourcing an answer to a question that I posted earlier, which is how do you track data requests? And so I know that kind of as LAFLA has gotten larger and our funders have gotten more sophisticated and our internal team is getting more sophisticated as well, we get more and more requests for data. And we have not, as of yet, created a actual formalized way that we're tracking those. So we've got some good stuff over on the grant side specifically of like which reports do you run and what filters and et cetera. And the grants team is really great about keeping those up to date. But for the more one-off situations, I personally have not set up something that I'm happy with yet. And so I really want this to be a conversation. So feel free to come off mute at any time. Cameras are entirely optional, although obviously we always love to see your face, but again, totally optional. So feel free to chat, feel free to unmute, whatever is the easiest way to participate. And so I'm also going to drop into the chat a link to the document that I've started to kind of outline various options for tracking data requests. And for today, at least for this hour, I've turned that link on to anyone with the link can edit. So if there's info you have, links you have, stuff you want to drop in just on your own, then please feel free to do so. We want this to really be a crowdsourced document. And so I guess my first question for all of you is, how do we outline what we need from a data request tracking system? I've started to outline some basic requests here, basic functions here that, any system needs to be able to receive data requests. So, that needs to be an inbox or some repository of getting those requests. Being able to add information to them that's relevant that you might want to filter by based on dates, who sent in the request, what the request is for, and then what was the answer, what was the response that you as the data person gave them, and how did you get that? And so that's really the basic functions as I identified them. And then some additional optional features, being able to assign other data team members to various requests, being able to customize, tags or kind of indexing systems, templates, request status, priorities, perhaps, deadlines, and some other kind of categorization. But is there anything that I've missed or that you think would be helpful to add here, kind of in the overall requirements for a system like this? And if so, you can either add them or come off mute and tell me. Yeah, thank you.
I had a thought, and I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if anyone said this or not yet, but I think also the ability to like filter and sort the history of requests, so it's easier to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
How about reporting?
Yeah, like reporting out to see kind of like what request has a specific program made over the last however many days, right? Can I spell today? There we go. Would you consider that to be a kind of basic core function or something that's more kind of optional?
I think that could be optional. Although I guess it depends. How often are you asked, hey, how often has this department or this report been generated? Or some organizations don't really ask that question, then it's an optional feature for them. But some departments actually query the IT team how many tickets per month or per year, or
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I put like basic filter and sort in the kind of basic functions, because obviously you want to be able to get that data back out. Otherwise, what's the point of tracking it and having a formalized system? But maybe not everyone needs that more advanced level of like, okay, on average, how many tickets are we getting in per year, per person, et cetera, and for what? So, okay, well, that's super useful. What else? What else do we want to add here?
So we see in the chat that people have said for tracking, what system is the request for? So like what system are you having to get the data from?
Yeah. So,
and then there's
yeah,
also
source.
a request or a note in the chat about, I usually like seeing the department that requested the data.
Yep.
And having a category about the type of report, something that could use for tags. And having an option for someone to provide a mock-up of what they're envisioning.
Oh, that's
which is
cool.
really interesting.
Yeah, I actually want to follow up on that point a little bit in a minute, but go ahead. Let someone come off mute.
Probably ability to attach. So the mock-up could probably be attached, but yeah.
Yeah, that's super useful. Kind of following up on that mock-up, what is that? Have you found a way that works for you to get that from staff? I know that sometimes, I just had a request this morning that's like, I want to collect data about a prior report, a prior supervisee to find good stories. And so it took a lot of kind of back and forth of like, what do you even, where is that data? The type of data you're talking about? Are you wanting closed data outcomes, whether it's marked as a good story? So there's a lot of back and forth to even get to the point of figuring out what they wanted. So I'm very curious how that mock-up process has helped facilitate that, or what's worked for you. And feel free to chat. Yeah, go ahead. No, you're good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I popped that in. So I used to work at Stanford, and I used to do like student reporting, but we had so many different data sources and all this other, just like there was so much out there. And so when someone was like, I need a report, we'd be like, great, tell me more, like every single time. And so
Yep.
one of the things I found that helped was like, and it varied depending on sort of like the user, right? Like their comfort level with, like Excel or whatever. But one of the things that had always helped us was like having a mock-up. And so like I used to be able to work with mock-ups that were like literally chicken scratch on a piece of paper, where it's like, oh, okay, I'd want a column like here, here, here. And I'm like, to me, as long as I can see what their brain is doing, like that was helpful. I think my favorite option was always just like throw like some column headers in Excel. So, like, let me see what data you would expect here. Like, because I think for a lot of people, it's like trying to describe it. It's a lot harder. And then like you can build that from there where you say, okay, well, where do you get this? Right. Like once you have sort of like a template, I guess, for like what the column header should be. If you're not like, yeah, it's helpful to sort of understand, okay, like, so for example, if someone's like, I want a thing that can show me good stories, like, great, tell me more about how we could do that. Or like, let's think about how do we get this here? Like what data sources do we need to combine? What kind of like, can we combine data sources for that, right? Like just asking those questions and having a visual tool to help with that discussion, I think was really helpful. So like things have run the gamut. My default is Excel, but if people can like chicken scratch it for me, attaching pictures would also work like really well. So yeah.
I prefer do they. I like that framing. Yeah, I want to kind of follow this thread a little bit of, tracking data requests is kind of dependent on getting data requests that you can actually answer, right? And getting kind of mapping that request for what the person is trying to get at with the data that you actually have. And so kind of before we're even thinking about systems, maybe we're thinking about, processes of, how do you get those requests in a meaningful way? And obviously that's going to overlap with the system, right? Like what capabilities do you have? But does anyone else have any kind of good ideas of kind of when you're getting those types of data requests, what are you asking folks to provide you? What's your process for helping them to give you the information you need to get them the data? Any thoughts on that vein?
I mean, I'll be honest, all I have is a bad idea, which
Sure.
is the only thing that I've ever found that works is you have to sit down with them and walk through. Like I've never had any success with email. It almost always takes at least one meeting because what people tend to think of as a very simple question, how many seniors did we help with eviction last year? Well, I have about 40 questions before I can write that report, and they're not even going to basically understand why I have those questions. And a meeting's the only way I've often been able to find a meeting of the minds. And I don't love that answer, frankly. I'd love a better one. But it is what I have found that works.
I mean, that maybe even goes into like, for these tools, maybe meeting scheduling or booking capabilities would be something that would be really useful. Like you send in the request and it automatically says, okay, let's talk about it. Let's find 15 minutes so we can get on a call and sort that out.
This may be also a bit basic, but I often find asking, why do you need this data or what are you hoping to use it for can be really helpful because I think sometimes you have a bit of the XY problem. People are like coming with the solution that they think they need, but if you actually know what is the problem that they're trying to solve or the question that they're trying to answer, sometimes you can help them get there in a bit of a simpler way.
No, I think that's super important because I often have that as well. People will ask me for something and I'm like, oh, here's that data, but why do you need it again? And turns out what they asked for was not at all what they needed. And if they had used it for the purpose they thought they were going to use it for, it would have caused a lot of downstream kind of negative effects. So other existing reports that might be similar to what they want. Yep. Carly, I don't want to put you on the spot again, but do you have any ways that you're kind of getting folks to those existing reports? Is it do folks have like a set of links that they're regularly using? How are folks getting to those kind of commonly used reports?
That's a great question. I feel like it's usually just asking people. I don't even think we track this. Like sometimes we'll ask this like in a back and forth on an email, but or like with a help ticket, but I think most of the folks we have at our organization use like whatever's available in legal. I'm so sorry if you can hear my dogs behind me. They're playing very rowdy.
I've got a Chihuahua mix and a Husky mix, so I totally understand.
Okay. I'm like, just know I'm not growling at you. Okay.
Yep.
What you call it? So yeah, so most of the folks at my organization will use like legal server, which is our CMS, and we'll just go through whatever's in there and just kind of just do a search for like some key terms. But not everybody has been trained on that. And so it's very hit or miss. But I do think that having a conversation is usually the best way to like talk through that. Because sometimes they're like, oh, here, I have this thing, and then they pull up an Excel file from like 1999. And I'm like, no, I don't, that's not gonna work. But or just to see like the what does it look like that's going back to the visual thing, right? Like let me see what it is you want, because sometimes there's like a now defunct report that maybe used to be super helpful but isn't anymore because it's not like loading live data or what for whatever reason. But yeah, I think just having the conversation like I think is the easiest way of doing that back and forth, which is not ideal, but it works.
Yeah. Kind of to Glenn's point in the chat of does it make sense to limit who asks for data and kind of have a filtering system or kind of a sanity check before it gets to you? Has anyone implemented that at your organization, and what's been the kind of pros and cons of that?
So I'll just throw in, I mean, for me, you keep having support staff or social workers coming and say, oh, I'd like this point. I'm like, what do you need that for? Maybe you should talk to your supervisor and come back with, a full idea of what exactly you're trying to do. So I mean, I basically stopped trying to write reports for people who can't articulate a solid reason why they want something.
Yeah,
That could also help with the issue of duplicate data requests, where you get the same data, what turns out to be the same data request from 4 different people for a single grant, but worded in slightly different ways. And you
yeah.
eventually find out that you've been answering the same question from 4 different people who are all working on the same project.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, there's a someone on Instagram who's just hilarious about that. And one of the things that she was making a reel about was, why doesn't the data match? And it's like, well, you ask different questions, you get different data. Like that's just how it works. Yeah. So yeah, I've had a lot of curiosity around kind of having some trainings on how to request data. So I put together for our management team kind of a short document, although it's long by my standards, it's 2 pages, on kind of like when you're asking for data, what should you think about? So like you always have to tell me a date range. If you don't tell me a date range, I'm going to ask you for one. If you tell me a date range and you don't tell me what date you're talking about, like if you just tell me last year, but you don't tell me, was it cases open, cases worked on, cases closed, cases that were open at any time in the year, like kind of additional date types, it's not going to help me so much. But I also told them kind of when I was providing that document that I would rather kind of have that meeting to get on the same page than have them not ask me at all because it's intimidating, right? And so it's that balance of, I want to get as much information as I can out of your brain of what you want up front, but I also don't want to make people feel like they have to be the data expert to get data. Like that's honestly what, I feel like I'm there to support them in doing.
So I don't want to let it slip too far back. Jessica mentioned that she's found that it's helpful to have request type, whether it's report building, report editing, adding a field to a report, or updating fields to reports. And I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that kind of I think would be on my wish list based on that would be tying it then into your case management system, right? Of like, if you make that change in your case management system to build the report, edit the report, add the field, or update it, can you make some indication in the CMS itself of kind of what connected to the request, right? Like, why did we do this? What happened? So that, if you hand off the system in the future, or if you're like me and you forget what you did 2 years ago, that you can go back and figure that out. Yeah, I'll send around after this chat. I'll send around kind of the document, or I'll upload the document that I put together on training, kind of what to know about data. It is not one of my like most proud pieces of work. There are things that I'm proud of, and there are things that are like, this is okay, I guess. And this is definitely in that second category. So would love to make that useful for you guys, but also would welcome any suggestions that you have on how to make that even better. Or if there's an entirely different approach, right? If it's just a matter of taking 10 or 15 minutes every management meeting and saying, okay, when you're asking for dates, here's the kinds of dates that you can get. When you're asking for information about cases, like here's some intake information, here's some closing information, etc. Okay, so this has been super helpful. I do want to kind of move on to talking about tools specifically. And again, I'll leave this link kind of live to edit if there's additional stuff that I missed up there at the top. But so from the kind of email thread that we started off with, it sounds like some of the common tools that folks use for ticketing are either existing IT ticketing systems or existing ticketing systems generally, or there's stuff that you built on your own. So either kind of just a protocol based on email, or for those of us who are on Microsoft 365, there's a lot of automation and data tools there. So I would love to hear from folks. I've got a list of some options here. Is anyone using these currently? Any of these here, or any other ones that are not listed here?
I'm currently using Spiceworks for my ticketing system.
Right? How are you finding that? I noticed that you put that, I got the email from you, and then I'm curious because it's free, and free is the magic word, right? But what have you found using that? Is it useful? What does the feature set look like?
It's, I think it's at the end of the day, a very basic ticketing system, but it has a good enough UI for me to use. And I would argue even um, for customers or for staff to use. Um, I can share my screen if you want me to give you an idea of what it looks like.
Yeah, let me turn off my screen real quick and um, whenever you're ready.
Host
Well,
enabled for yeah. Thank you. Let's see, share. Alrighty, so I don't have any open tickets because I try my best to not have any open tickets, but there are two pending. They are currently waiting on someone else who is not me. But as you can see here, there are basic views: open, waiting, closed, unassigned, my tickets. I'm an IT department of one, so it's not very. I'm not using this with a team, but it definitely is capable of being used as a team. For a ticket request, which would be data or otherwise, right? I just fill the form out. Currently, because it's me, myself, and I'm using the main account as the contact. I can add my staff in here, so as I communicate in the ticket, they're CC'd on the communication, but it's 20 of us here, and they go directly to me when they need anything. So this is really just me logging the information. So they don't really need to be here, but the the system is capable of doing it, right? So if whomever submitted the request will get an email or can get an email of that the request has been created. If you make notes, they can get a notification that notes have been added. Then obviously upon closing, they will get an email as well. For right now, summary is just what an email subject would be, and then description would be whatever they had asked for. Sometimes they send requests via email, and I just copy that email and paste it on the description. Or if the request came from a Teams, then I would have copied it from the Teams chat into here. Assignee is just myself. And then the categories, the category field is default from Spiceworks, but you could edit the category. On top of the category, I created 1, 2, 3 more custom fields with for the subcategory hardware, subcategory software, and the staff. I want to know, or I want to be able to report on who submitted the request. And then obviously you could attach a file if you want to. There is a way to offload the data and feed it into Power BI if needed, or Excel, obviously. But I imagine for my data requests, this is the same ticketing system I use. So for all requests, even non-IT related, I think I have a category here somewhere. Service request non-IT, the toilet's broken. But somehow it came to me. I logged that down because it was still a request and I still potentially worked on it, even if it's to send an email, right? yeah, so open for any questions.
No, for a free system, that looks pretty robust. So that's really great, and thank you for bringing that to the group. I feel like folks will find that super useful. Um, for creating that ticket, looks like you're kind of manually creating that. So maybe you're getting an email or a call or something like that, and then you're creating all the tickets. Is that something where theoretically that could be put staff facing, of either the staff send an email and it creates a ticket, or they go to a portal and fill out that information and then it goes into you?
I'm glad you asked, because that's what I'm looking for right now. So the portal URL right here, I believe, is well, maybe not. I could have sworn one of these links goes to an online forum. Maybe I have it disabled. That's why it's not going there.
Gotcha.
And then there's this email right here that I believe can be used to automatically create the ticket. Obviously, well, I believe they also have hashtags of sorts where you could email the system updates if you're not in front of the computer to, make updates. But nowadays it's a browser-based software, so cell phones could potentially. So yeah, there is a way to do that. I feel like for me, it's not worth training my staff to do that yet.
Yeah.
I think when we reach 80 to 100 folks, and I'm starting to get bombarded with information, then, hey, there's this tool that could help you, help me, help you.
Exactly. It's always an interesting pitch to try and make, and folks never quite believe you, but eventually they get on board and like, oh, wait a minute, this works.
Well, I for what it's worth, I know an organization very close to me wherein it was at first a suggestion for them to send tickets in, but the organization grew large, and now it's pretty much, if you don't submit a ticket, we're not going to help you.
Yeah,
because it does help the queue. It does help with timelines. It does help with staff management. And so,
No, I really feel like, and maybe this is kind of going into that best practices and kind of process side of things, is that the need for a system typically tends to pop up when you add someone, right? So if it's a single data person and you're not just totally overwhelmed, then maybe a ticketing system is nice, but not necessary. But once you start adding in additional people that are responding to those data requests, and you're needing to coordinate on that side, I feel like at that point, it really becomes almost a necessity to have some kind of collaboration space where you're able to.
And for me, it's, I don't know if I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow. And if I do leave, I want to leave my successor something, and they can use this. Search tools, awesome. Like I said, if you download it into an Excel, then the search tool of that will be awesome. Or so it's just another way for me to impart knowledge for the future. Right?
Yeah. No, that's really great. I'm adding in here to the kind of second part about best practices, tips and tricks of why use a request system at all. So obviously that kind of continuity and institutional knowledge retention is super important. And then preparation as data/IT team grows. And I'll come back in here and do more, actually get this formatted. I noticed there's some chat of folks using Freshdesk, and folks, there's someone put their email in the chat to follow up, and I'll probably actually follow up with Blaine about that as well. I know we're using Freshdesk for our IT tracking, not for kind of data requests yet. And it is super useful. So you can see we've got a bunch. these are not actually overdue tickets. We just haven't closed them out yet. But basically, the nice thing about this is that folks can, send an email to open a ticket. We found that making folks go to a portal or a page to put in a ticket is a barrier that most of them won't do. They'll instead just directly message or email members of our IT team. And that's not what we want. So we want to make the right answer, the right kind of protocol, the easiest one. And so we have an email to ticket system. And then, whenever you as one of the IT team members log in and respond to any of those tickets, that ticket then gets assigned to you. There are some really cool integrations, for example, with Teams. And so whenever I respond to a ticket in Freshdesk, I get a notification in Teams that I've been assigned to that ticket, and then I also get notifications when the requester updates that ticket or responds. And you can kind of see over here on the left, there's a lot of features that honestly we're not using yet. So there's like, if you wanted to coordinate IT with HR, etc., you can have these kind of onboarding and offboarding like processes. You can track assets in here. You can track projects. You can have one of the things they're doing, they're kind of pushing now is having different teams. So you could have, an HR team, a data team, a general IT request team, a facilities team, and they could all in theory be using the same platform. Again, we have not had that kind of broader conversation at LAFLA, but it has worked well for our general IT request. We don't have any complaints about it. I haven't, again, personally done the analysis of kind of pricing and how it compares to other systems, but as far as functionality, I personally don't have any complaints. Any other systems that folks like, or are there any other comments that folks have generally about using these types of ticketing systems for data requests? Is there anything that folks are using that we don't have listed currently? Multitasking over here, so apologies for the lag. The next kind of option that we talked about a little bit over email, and I would love to hear if anyone's kind of built this out more extensively, is the DIY method of using Microsoft 365 tools to track these requests. So if anyone has that already set up or has any comments about that option, then please feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute. I'm pulling up something we've got set up on SharePoint that's not specifically tied to this, but is tangentially tied to it. So I'll bring that up if no one has any other comments.
Yeah, I'm actually working on figuring out like whether Planner or Microsoft Lists makes more sense for us. I've done some kind of like pro and con listing out of them, which is like if you're thinking about using a Microsoft 365 platform like that like integrates with your email and Teams and stuff like that, what I would say is like, I guess it depends on what you're looking for, but Planner is going to give you like this great like Kanban board layout. And it's like as far as usability, like you can kind of use it out of the box. You can't really customize it or, add fields or anything like that. So it's kind of like the fields that are there are what you're going to have to use, and you can kind of like figure out how to fit it into what you're looking for. Whereas Lists has a lot more customizability. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like an Airtable, except it's not like a database itself. It's kind of just like a place to link out to like other things, like other SharePoint files or websites and things like that. But the customizability is really high. So if you know already like exactly what you want, and it's a lot of specialized fields and things like that, then like Lists is definitely the way to go. And I'm right now working on like drafting up what either or both of those would look like for our data team. so that we can kind of integrate it in with 365. The other thing that I'll say is that like we as a data team are separate from IT. So we have like an IT service provider. And so we are only using it, just the two of us, for like report requests about like stuff from legal server and things like that. So, you know, our needs might be a little different from other folks.
Does your team, does your organization use Planner more generally for anything? Or would this be kind of a new product for them as well as a new use case?
I don't know. I don't really think so. Like I do just personally as like my own like to-do list and things like that. I kind of like moved over to that from Trello when we moved over to Microsoft 365. It's not something that I don't see us having like an interface where other people can like put in their requests. It's definitely just knowing our staff, like our teams, I'm like, they're probably just going to message me and I would add a project or a request or something to it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We're seeing, you know, very similar things as far as, you know, Planner. Let me just put my screen share back up. I know it's paused. I want to resume. There we go. So very similar, like we have Planner, but you know, I feel like folks start using it and then they quickly run into a lot of the limitations of Planner, because like you said, it is just so it is what you get, right? Like there's not that kind of level of customizability that you would have with other tools. So like I build stuff out for myself, but then I end up not using it a ton. I'll use like the tasks and to do separately, just like keeping my own list of things to do and less of the kind of visual interface. Um, yeah, and lists are that kind of like middle ground, right, between a full database and, you know, something that is more kind of out of the box and kind of restricted. So for example, we've got our grants team site that we've put together, and we've moved over all of our grants management to using SharePoint lists instead of, you know, a designated grants management system, because we just couldn't find a system that met our needs. We couldn't find one that had all the fields that we wanted to track, all the customizability. And because it's on a list, what we can do is we can actually, one of the things you can do with lists is to, you know, attach, you know, specific people to, this is our testing site, so there's no no real data on here, but you can kind of assign specific people within your Office 365 ecosystem to be responsible for something. You can then connect that to an automation that would, again, send those emails as necessary as the ticket progressed. You can attach, you know, things to lists, and you can reference other lists. So if you have like an example, maybe a common responses list or an existing reports list, you could then connect that up to your request list to help you kind of keep those two things separate but connected. And so there's a lot of flexibility. But I think that the reason that I haven't really moved forward with this for this purpose is, again, kind of Ashley, what you're getting at is figuring out, okay, but what would I exactly want that to look like, and having the space to brainstorm that. So I'd certainly be curious to follow up again once you've had the time to put it together for your organization and see if we've gotten something set up for LAFLA as well. Yeah, and to Ray's point, I think that that's another one of the big pros of Microsoft 365 systems, right, is that you can make it meet your exact needs. The con is that you have to know what your needs are and build it to meet those needs, and then have someone that's familiar enough with the system to maintain it, you know, in perpetuity, right? It's not something that you can just ask Microsoft, you know, how is it supposed to work? They're going to come back to you and say, well, how did you set it up? And so I can definitely see that being again, kind of going against that continuity reason for creating the system in the first place, if you don't have that kind of knowledge baked in already. Any other thoughts? Have folks built out anything that they like? I noticed as I was researching for this, this call that there is this kind of help desk plus, which is built on SharePoint, but is not something you have to build yourself. And they've got a free version, but then they also have a lifetime license for their extended version, or a monthly subscription for their extended version, depending on what your preferences are. So I'm actually probably going to check that out at some point, and see what that's all about. But then again, I run up against the con of like, but then we have a separate system for data and IT, and do we really want to maintain two systems? So I do not have the best answer for that. I see a note. Go ahead.
Just on the topic of Planner, not using it to do anything for ticketing, sort of, or like tracking requests coming in that other people generate. But currently, if people want something, they email me, or we have another person on our data group now. And so we're just now trying to use Planner to sort of organize our work, and like who is working on what report, or who is working on what requests that we've seen come in. But that's taking something and making a ticket for ourselves out of it, instead of, so we like, if something's unclear, we ask the person before we make the ticket out of the email that they sent us asking for something. And so just as an internal team tool, as opposed to something that's meant for, this is how you request stuff. So seeing if it works well, we're wondering if like just like you can define steps and who is doing what next. And so for like grant reporting, or things that our team that we have to do every month, is that you can have a recurring task set up so that you can move it to complete, and then have it come back to, here's a new task at the start of the new month. And so it can be helpful for that sort of purpose as well. But we're trying to see exactly how helpful it will be.
Yeah, one of the things that I've kind of noticed just following Planner generally is that Microsoft doesn't really know who the target audience for it is. And I think that shows in kind of how they're developing it. So they keep adding features, but it may not be the ones that their user base would want, because I don't totally know who their user base for Planner is versus for project and for other kind of task management tools. So yeah, I have a lot of curiosity about how it will continue to develop. But I know, at least for me, one of the challenges with any of these systems that are kind of a two-step of like, you get the request and then you enter the request into a system, is that I'm really bad about actually entering the request into the system if it's a short request. So if it's just a matter of like, hey, can you point me to this data, and I point them to the right direction and maybe add like a column to an existing report, I forget to enter it. And so then it's kind of defeated my own purpose of having these systems if I'm not, if it's not going there, if it's not going to this system in the first place, right? If it's relying on me to enter that initial request, I'm personally very, very bad about doing that. But that may just be a personal shortcoming. Any other thoughts about the Microsoft 365 based systems, or any experience working with them? Well, thank you all for this discussion. It has been incredibly productive for me. I have a lot more information that I'm going to go back and think through as we start building this out ourselves. I do unfortunately have to jump off a little bit early today, so I'm going to hand kind of the call back off to Shelley and to the rest of you all. So if you would like to keep editing this document, please feel free. If you've got other questions for the community, besides talking about data management, please feel free to do that as well. This is a space for all of us. So with that, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you again next month. If we don't have another topic by then, maybe we will follow up on this training on how to request data and kind of get more data literacy in your organization overall. So thank you all, and see you soon.
Thanks, Susan. All right, I am going to stop the recording so that we can have kind of an open forum question and answer session. So let me get that done.